Brother Shafiq, Assalamu alaikum.
Assalam, Sister Aisha. Maybe you
How
can
are you?
start a little bit more later, right?
Oh, I'm sorry, say it again?
The recording can start a little bit more later, I guess.
Sure, I can pause it.
Yeah.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Abdullah Mitchell. I'm the Executive Director of the Council of Islamic Organizations of Greater Chicago. This evening, I want to welcome all of you to a special program that's being hosted by our Civic Engagement Committee and been able to secure the services and volunteer efforts of Poligon, a nonprofit organization designed whose primary purpose is to support civic engagement in the Muslim community. And this evening's program installment really goes to the heart of civic engagement. This is a key concern of our Civic Engagement Committee that is working to bring programs like the one we have this evening, as well as to engage our constituency, our community in registering to vote, being active, and bringing you the information that you need to know to make the best civic decision that's going to benefit you and your community. This evening's program is very special. I mean, it goes to the heart of what civic engagement is all about. When we start talking about civic engagement, usually we're talking about advocating for some particular position that advances our particular interests. And this evening, we're fortunate to have Nadia Muzaffar. Nadia is a licensed attorney in the state of Pennsylvania with a broad experience in developing and executing advocacy programs, both on the state and federal level. A lot of them address very issues that were concerned in the area of social justice, whether it relates to juveniles or to services that are needed for those that cannot and are not an effective voice for their interests. So this evening, we're having this rare opportunity to learn from someone with a lot of experience how we can become better advocates and better serve the communities which we serve. So with that, I would now yield the platform to Nadia Muzaffar.
Thank you so much, Brother Mitchell. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really happy to be here, and I really love this training. So really happy to be doing this congressional advocacy training for folks. I know we're going to have a question and answer time at the end. I'm also happy if folks want to put questions in the chat. I will keep an eye on that. And sometimes I think it works well to try to address questions as they come up as well. So we will have a couple of different options, and I'm always available after for follow-up or additional questions that you may have or ideas you want to discuss. So as Brother Mitchell said, my name is Nadia Muzaffar. I'm on the board of directors of Poligon Education Fund. Right now, we're a purely volunteer-led organization, and really passionate about this idea of teaching the Muslim community about congressional advocacy. And in my day job, I live in Philadelphia and I am an attorney, but my work is primarily legislative advocacy in the juvenile justice and child welfare spaces, but really happy to be able to use those skills to also advocate for specific issues that are really important to the Muslim community. And as mentioned, just a brief overview of Poligon. Poligon promotes positive policy change by teaching congressional advocacy skills to the American Muslim community and by educating policymakers on issues that's important to the Muslim community. And so I really like to describe it as a two-way street. So we want Muslims to directly be able to contact their congresspeople, speak to them, share their ideas, but we also want to be directly communicating with Congress ourselves and be able to share ideas that are and values and other things that are important to the Muslim community. And inshallah, alhamdulillah, like our mission is very rooted in our faith. And this hadith by Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam really goes to the core of why we started Poligon. And I think what gives us all the strength and the hope to continue to keep going. And that is that we have a duty as Muslims to work for justice. And as this hadith says, whoever sees an evil, encouraging us to change it with our hands, with our tongues, and if not, with our hearts. And so we feel that congressional advocacy is really a way for us to create change, not only for American Muslims, but the American communities in general, and of course, our global community, as is currently really at the forefront of our minds today with the situation in Gaza. So as we go through the presentation today, it is going to talk a little bit about what Muslim civic engagement looks like, a little refresher on the legislative branch, but I really want to focus the bulk of our presentation today on congressional advocacy best practices, really go step by step through how that looks like. And although our techniques and things can really be implemented across any area that you're interested in, or any issues that are important to you right now, just given the state of the world and our community, we know that everyone is very concerned about what's happening in Gaza. And so we have some talking points and specific strategies to share in terms of that. And then finally, we will talk a little bit in what we call like our 201 training, which is about how to take your advocacy to the next level by building community power. So to start, especially as we started Poligon and going into the work today, we wanted to do a little bit of looking into what Muslim civic engagement looks like. And this is from a report from the Institute for Social Policy and Understanding. And it shows kind of these, I would say, these mixed images of what Muslim political engagement looks like. And so in terms of registering to vote, we have a really high percentage, 78% of Muslims are registered to vote, although with only 15% reporting that they're intending to vote. American Muslims are mostly focused on domestic issues, which may seem surprising to some, and regular mosque attendance is directly linked to greater civic engagement, which I think makes sense given what we know about community engagement and really caring about justice and wanting to make a change that is so rooted in our religion. Muslims are most likely to have attended a town hall in 2020, and they're more likely than other faith communities to volunteer for political campaigns. So also some interesting facts. But and while I imagine this number has drastically changed in the last 6 months, at the time of this study, only 1 out of 6 American Muslims had directly contacted their congressional representatives in the past year. And that is the type of advocacy that we are really encouraging folks to do with this training. And right now we're in this emergency situation where everyone is, of course, making calls about ceasefire and aid to Gaza, and that is extremely important, as we're going to talk about. But we are encouraging people to have that same kind of urgency for so many other really important issues that Congress deals with every day, and make Muslims a voice that our representatives have to listen to and have to grapple with. And advocacy is so important because it's really the #1 way we can advance the issues we care about and help bring about systemic, lasting change. And not only do we change the actual policies being made, but we change the discourse and the conversations around these things. And so, I think when we look at how the rhetoric on the genocide in Gaza has changed from early October to now, we really see that a lot of this is due to the advocacy, the political advocacy that's being done by individuals and, of course, organizations. And so, I think very frankly, there's a lot of different sources of influence in politics. So there's money, there's media, there's vote, there's electoral prospects, and we aren't denying that all of these things exist. But for what we want to emphasize is that the most important source of influence is a constituent, and constituent advocacy, we've just found through our work, really does work For example, the Congressional Management Foundation noted that direct constituent interactions have more influence on lawmakers' decisions than other strategies. This is an example of Poligon team and coalition members after they met with Representative Judy Chu, for example, to discuss the No Ban Act, which was a really good example of a coalition really changing congressional minds on a topic very important to the Muslim community. And 94% of congressional staff believe that direct constituent contact influences undecided lawmakers, and 79% of congressional staff believe personal stories help shape legislators' opinions. And that's definitely something that I have come across in my work, that the most powerful thing that has been able to change the minds of folks who, I work in the criminal justice space, so things like people who are like tough on crime, or from a conservative state that doesn't want to do criminal justice reform. It is those direct stories from people who are impacted by a certain issue that is among the most powerful things to change people's minds about an issue or give them a new perspective. So I've definitely seen this in action. And so before we go into all the things that we wanted to do, we really just wanted to highlight that this is an extremely powerful tool, even when it feels like it is not there's so much against you. And so one example that I love is that from an example of one congressional member, they stated, for example, that when they received 5 calls on something, they put their policy issue on the agenda. When they received 7 calls, the policy issue stayed on their agenda, something that they needed to discuss. And then more than 10 calls, it put their issue at the top of the agenda at the next meeting. And this just again highlights that repeated calls, repeated letters, repeated faxes, repeated visits, even if there isn't directly policy change from it, it keeps a topic at the forefront of a discussion within the congressional office. It means the representative has to hear about it, has to hear those stories, has to know that people are calling. The people working in the office have to take your calls every day. And that is an extremely powerful tool. And if at the end of the day, people don't do something different, we at least want them to grapple with the consequences of their inaction every single day. So I'm going to go into a little bit of a legislative branch refresher. And this is all pretty basic, but just to quickly go through it, there's 100, we have a bicameral Congress. So there's 100 senators, 434 representatives. There's 2 senators, two senators per state. Right now, there's 48 Democrats, 49 Republicans, 3 independents, and they serve 6-year terms. And there's 434 representatives, 1 member per district, 213 Democrats, 220 Republicans, and 1 vacancy. Usually there's 435. And that is because George Santos resigned. And so in terms of when you're first starting, the first step of doing congressional advocacy is looking up who your senators and your representatives are and making them the direct learning about them, learning about, what they stand for, what they're like, what committees they stand on, which we'll talk about just briefly. Just step 1 in advocacy is just knowing who your representatives are. So in Illinois, for example, it is Durbin and Duckworth. Those are your senators, and then everyone kind of has a different representative based on where you live in the state. And we also want to share this really brief show of how a bill becomes a law, or a piece of legislation becomes a law. For those of us who grew up with Schoolhouse Rock when we were little, that's the I'm Just a Bill song. But overall, what happens is that a bill is introduced. It can be introduced by anyone in the House or in the Senate, And once it's introduced, it's sent to a committee. And so depending on the subject of the bill, there's different committees. So there's foreign affairs, defense, homeland, education related committees, agriculture related committees, and there's committees in the Senate and in the House. So depending on the subject of the bill, it's sent to a committee, and that's where the committee reads it, makes amendments, really does the bulk of making the bill like what it is. And then the members of the committee vote on whether it should go onto what we call the floor. And the floor is when the entire House or the entire Senate votes on something. And so if the committee, makes its amendments, et cetera, votes on the bill, and then it either goes to the House floor or the Senate floor. And a bill has to pass through both the House and the Senate in order to become a law. And so sometimes a Senate bill and a House bill are introduced at the same time, and they both go through this process. Sometimes a bill starts in the House, and then when it passes the House, it goes to the Senate. And so happy to delve into questions about this more, but overall, I'm sharing this because later we're going to be talking about discussing specifics of legislation. So if there is a bill that you are really think is important or you think is really bad, knowing where it is in the life cycle of a bill is important to be able to speak on it and to make like an ask. Like if yeah, it is important. So for example, if you know that a bill is in the House and you really support it, you would want to call your representatives and say, I really support this bill, please vote for it. Or if you know that you really care about education and your representative sits on the education committee, you could call them and say, hey, this bill is coming through your committee, please make these amendments to it. So that's why it's good to have a very general idea of the legislative process. But I also want to say that this is not like everyone, this process of communicating with your representatives should be extremely accessible. Every single person who's an American citizen should be able to do it. So even if you don't know any of this information, you should still be able to call and tell them your feelings on different things. And you should call and tell them your feelings on different things. But just sometimes knowing and doing a little bit of research can help you like really tailor your asks and make them as precise as possible. And second, I also wanted to just quickly review the hierarchy of a member's office. And this is especially important if you are trying to set up an office visit, or you are maybe calling and you can't figure out like who exactly you're talking to. So usually you have some staff assistants or interns kind of at the like the bottom of the seniority hierarchy. And then you'll also have people that are working in communication. The scheduler is often the person that you're going to be emailing with if you're trying to set up a visit. And then you have some folks that are more directly working on policy. So that would be your legislative director, your policy advisor, legislative assistant, legislative correspondent, and chief of staff. And my experience has been that unless it's an extremely friendly legislator who has some like really strong relationship with you, that most of the time when you go to an office visit, you are going to meet with the top level of or like the level under the chief of staff. So you'll meet with the legislative director or the policy advisor or the legislative assistant or the legislative correspondents. Sometimes you're meeting with the chief of staff. You're almost never going to meet with the congressional member, but that's okay. Like they still all of the folks in this kind of third row from the left have a pretty significant role in making policy, and talking to them can really help craft policy. And just really quickly, for those who want to look up your representative, if you go to the U.S. House of Representatives website, you can enter your zip code and look up your representative. And same, there's also a senator, looking for a senator option on those websites as well. Great. So now I wanted to really get into the nitty-gritty of how you contact your representatives. And the 3 ways we're going to get into today is we're going to start with how to do phone calls, we're going to talk about office visits, and we're also going to talk about speaking at a town hall, which are the 3 main ways that we encourage folks to contact their members of Congress. So these are some really basic steps of how to contact your member of Congress, and we just want to make this like as easy as possible. I promise that I have done a call and I have literally timed myself, and it takes about 3 minutes from start to finish if you kind of have a plan of what you're going to say. And so we really want to demystify this process as much as possible. So we already talked about how the first step is you find your member. The second step is you call. And so if you're trying to call Washington, D.C., this is the number 202-224-3121. And this is the switchboard operator. Sometimes it is a person who picks up the phone, and you just say, oh, can I be transferred to Senator X's office, Senator Durbin's office? Can I be transferred to this person's office? Or there is like a electronic thing, and you can just say their name and the computer will transfer you. This is the Washington, D.C. number. You can also, every member also has regional offices. So they'll have offices in Illinois, which also have staff. And so sometimes if you want, you can call all of the offices if you really are concerned about something, or, you know, if you really feel like, oh, I've called DC and I don't always get in, or the mailbox is always full, which happens a lot now, you can also call their local offices. And I just, if I ever want to call a local office, their numbers are usually online. And step 3, you identify yourself. This is really important. You identify yourself as a constituent, and this makes them really pay attention. And when I'm calling my representatives, I really sometimes I'll try to say like what neighborhood I live in, so they really know that, oh yeah, like I really know the area and I am a constituent. I'm not making it up. So I'll say something like, oh, I live in South Philly and I'm a constituent of this rep or something. So I really just want them to know that I am very serious and I live and I vote for them. Then you prepare a script, and usually we recommend 1 issue per email or call. So you say, I am calling about, let's say, education funding. I'm calling about education funding. This issue is really important to me because I have children and I'm worried about their schooling. And okay, so that's like, you tell it, and this is where you keep it real short and explain why this issue is important to you. And then you make a clear ask. So the clear ask is one of the most important parts of the phone call. And that's where you say what the congressperson can do. And sometimes the ask is tricky because, you know, Congress has a certain set of powers. You know, they can't change everything. So the more you're able to tailor it to what they can actually do, specific things, the stronger your request is. So you can say, my ask is that you introduce a bill on this topic. My ask is that you vote yes on this. My ask is that you say no on this. That is a really clear, effective way. Great question that I just got. How do you feel about state congressmen, to how much legislative power they have, and what issues would you take to them versus a US congressperson? That is a great answer. State congress people have extreme amounts of power because they there's a lot of things in the US government that is under the control of states. So things like education, any sort of criminal justice thing, anything about like a lot of public benefits are state benefits. And so almost anything besides like significant foreign policy, your state congressman is actually might have more power. So for example, I said that I do criminal justice reform and like child welfare reform work. My work is like 90% state legislative based, because that state legislatures are the ones that that hold all of that power. So so I would say if you're I would maybe use the example of like kind of all the day-to-day stuff that you deal with when you're as a, you know, as a citizen of your state. So schools, your neighborhood, safety, all of any issues related to that, you would take to your state congressman for sure. The US Congress people, most foreign issues go to the US congressperson. Bigger, like, so national security, those types of issues. Not that, you know, there aren't federal education, there's federal criminal justice, all of that is definitely true, but I would say local and a lot of local issues are best going to a state representative. Yes. Okay. So I think there has been a lot of concerns about people just being like ineffective and not listening to concerns about ceasefire or anything else. And 5 meetings, wow, that is a lot of resilience. So I'm going to address that in just a minute, because I know that is just a concern for everyone. But in terms of, you know, I know that ceasefire is at the utmost of our minds right now, and we want to, you know, continue to think about how we can use congressional advocacy to advocate for an end to the genocide in Gaza. And so the first thing, as pointed out in this question, it sounds like folks on this call are already doing, is that we want to support Cori Bush's ceasefire resolution. Because remember, as I said, you know, Congress has a lot of power, but like limited power. So we can't just say like, stop the genocide in Gaza, because there's like how does a specific congressperson do that? So we have ways that they do that. And first is by calling for a ceasefire. And so Representative Cori Bush already created this really lovely script, and it's an example of how you can use the ceasefire resolution, how you can call and urge for the ceasefire resolution. A few other things that specifically you can ask for is to reject any additional military aid to Israel in furtherance of the genocide of Gazans. And you can specifically, adding to that, I know that Joe Biden is going against, not like going against Congress, but he's bypassing Congress to send military aid to Israel. And you can specifically ask that they call that out. And third, on Islamophobia, condemn anti-Muslim hate and all the Islamophobic incidents that have arisen during genocide of Gaza. So with this, there's kind of 2 specific actual voting actions they can take, including supporting the resolution and voting against any military aid. The third kind of thing they can do is speak out and change the conversation on rejecting, on both by, you know, telling Biden to stop sending aid and bypassing Congress, and speak out against Islamophobia. So I would highlight these as the most important talking points for discussion, and the specific asks you can make that Congress actually has the power to do. And these, besides HRS 786, these are a little general, but every once in a while, some specific bill comes up. So for example, a few days ago, I think, or maybe this was like last week, Bernie Sanders introduced a resolution that said if Israel had to report what they were using their weapons for, and if it turned out they were using their weapons for genocide or violating human rights, or they didn't send the reports in, they wouldn't get any more aid. It wasn't like the best resolution in the world, but it was something. And so, you know, if there's some specific topic like that that comes up, you can ask your rep to support that piece of legislation or that resolution. But until there is this specific resolution, you can just ask very generally for their support or their votes on a certain topic. In terms of looking up legislation, I just wanted to show you the resource of congress.gov. So congress.gov is a really helpful website where you can look up various pieces of legislation and see what is what's happening with it. So this is like what the homepage looks like. You can type in, if you know the number of the legislation, you can type that in here. So HRES 786, that is the ceasefire resolution. And if you are interested in kind of seeing what's happening with that or any other bill, you can look that up on congress.gov, and you could, you know, read the text of it. You can see, like earlier we were talking about committees. Here it says that it was referred to the House Committee on Foreign Affairs, so we know what committee it's sitting in. And importantly, you can look at the co-sponsors, so you can see if your representative is among the people that co-sponsored it, and if they were, maybe when you call them, give them a little thank you. Give them a little thank you. And so I think right now these are the specific, the resolution is a specific one on Gaza that we should be advocating for, answering the question in the chat. And how long does the legislation have to be signed before it dies? So right now, this legislation is in committee. And so the Congress runs in sessions, or like, yeah, so right now we're in the 2024 session, and the session is going to go until the end of the year. So if nothing happens to the bill before the end of the year, if it doesn't, then it's dead. So right now the bill is in, or the resolution, it's a resolution because it just gives their feelings about something instead of actually making anyone do anything. But it's the best we have, and it would still be a huge win if the resolution passed. And this is just because Congress itself doesn't have the power to make Israel have a ceasefire, but they have the power to strongly ask that Israel has a ceasefire, and they have the power to stop sending aid overseas. But so right now it's in committee. If it never gets voted out of committee at the end of the year, it's dead, and it would have to get introduced again. If it gets voted out of committee and then it just sits and never gets brought up for a House vote, then it also dies. And then if it gets voted, but the rules of the bill getting signed or the resolution getting signed are a little bit different, but overall, I would say, like, I think the answer you're looking for is the year. And this also highlights that the leadership, as sometimes you'll hear people say, like the majority leader or the committee chair, they have a lot of power because they're the ones that decide, oh, there's a bill in our committee, which bills are we actually going to talk about, which bills are we going to vote on? And so what's happening with this resolution right now is essentially it's just sitting in committee. People are signing on to it, but nothing's like happening. It's just sitting in committee, and no one is doing anything with it. All right, before we go on to town halls and office visits, which I definitely want to spend a little bit of time with, I will answer the question about, try to answer the question about the US congressman for your district being numb to your concerns about ceasefire, and how he's been unwavering. And, I think that's an extremely frustrating experience, and one that we have felt over and over again. So overall, I have several kind of feelings about this. First, this is a somewhat controversial take. I have been telling people that when I make my calls, that my vote is dependent on this issue. Like, I will be making a voting decision based on who is calling for ceasefire and who isn't. I live in Pennsylvania. It's a swing state. I think maybe the threat of not voting for the Democratic senators and reps is a little bit more of a threat in Pennsylvania than it is in Illinois. But I think, and I know there's a lot of concerns about our two-party system and whether the other party's better. And like, there's a lot of concerns about that, and happy to chat offline about that. But, I think it is, a year before the election is a very good time to start telling people what you're going to be making your voting decisions based on. And so if that isn't something that you are explicitly noting, I think this is a good time to start saying that now. Second, I think that there is, at the end of the day, if people are like not listening, not hearing, their hearts are closed, there's only so much we can do. We just have to, what I was kind of saying before is that we have to make them grapple with it. And accountability sometimes looks like, I'm going to take your time for you to look me in the eye 10 times, 12 times, 15 times to tell me that you're not going to do anything about genocide. And yes, of course, that's taking up all of our time. But to me, like that, I think that's a good use of time, that even if like their hearts aren't getting softened, or their, eyes and ears are close to reason, we do our part of continually making them grapple with the issue. And I think that's important. Third, I would say that if there are, and we share this a little bit later, if there are folks in your community who are directly, have family in Gaza, are directly impacted, like their stories are often the most powerful. Of course, it's like, it's like horrible to share information about your trauma and then have people tell you they're not going to do anything about it. So I recognize that that's a really hard ask, but that it, to the extent, I don't know who's attending these meetings, but to the extent that is an option and hasn't been tried, like could be another strategy. But at the end of the day, like I commend everyone who is doing this, like what feels like this thankless, no progress job. And what I just like to think about is that it's my job to continue making the asks. And if, Allah will know that I did my part, and what other people are doing is they're going to have to answer for that, I think is like at the end of the day, the only thing that makes me have hope. But I really, I think it just shows so much commitment to have 5 meetings and being unwavering. And, I think when election times comes up, like you have a response to that. And I know you all have a civic engagement committee, you're doing a lot with voting too. And I just think, hopefully you can use these things to make an impact with voting. So I know that's not the most hopeful answer, but I think that's kind of the place we're at right now. So speaking of office visits, which sounds like folks are doing here, before I do that, who controls bills that come to the floor in the Senate and the House? It is the Speaker of the House and the Senate, or the Speaker of the House and the Senate Majority Leader. So when we say, so if those people, for example, so sometimes you're supposed to call your constituent, but like sometimes we encourage everyone to like call the speaker and have them, even if you're not a constituent, to encourage them as well. Okay, moving on to office visits and town halls. And so it sounds like folks are doing a lot of these in their communities. So just as a quick, a town hall is when your member of Congress comes to some sort of public space and they give time for everyone to share something, to like meet their constituents. And then an office visit is when you call and you set up a meeting. So starting with town halls, with this slide, we have like a pretty 5-step kind of easy thing, just really quickly, similar to a phone call, introducing yourself, thanking your member for being there, telling a brief story, making a clear ask, following up. We have heard different formats of how this is going. I just heard there was a town hall in Pennsylvania where people were only able to ask questions through note cards, and that was very frustrating because you weren't able to stand up and they were clearly screening answers. But even in that, you can try to like write your topic within it. You can try to approach them before or after and see if that is helpful. And then finally, people said at one point when like it felt like no concerns were getting addressed, people just stood up, interrupted the person and said like, listen, like we really just are concerned and we want to talk about Gaza and we're inviting you to our mosque. And I don't know what the follow, this just happened like last week, but the member did agree to come to a visit at the mosque. So all this to say, like, this is the best practice of how to do a town hall. I recognize, especially in the current climate, that there might be differences from this, especially as folks are, censorship is like really on the rise about this issue. But again, I just wanted to really emphasize the tell a brief story. That is really going to be what cements your kind of cements the feelings around it and helps change their minds. And then second, similar, there's office visits where you can either go to DC and meet with staff, or you can do this in your home. So there's a few times a year, August, December, where Congress goes into what's called recess. And during that time, they are in their hometowns, and that's sometimes a good time to try to schedule an office visit. And as a plug, if you're on the Poligon mailing list, we usually will send out an alert during the August and December recesses so people know. But I think office visits more than anything require planning ahead. And so not only should you do the pre-work of scheduling the meeting and learning about your member of Congress, but we really we really do talking points for each person that's going to be there. And so we have some roles that people can say, but like I always sit everyone down and say, okay, what are you going to say? Like they don't have to tell me exactly what you're going to say, but you're going to make these points, you're going to make these points, you're going to make these points, and then I'm going to make the ask. And so when you get in there, you look polished, you look like a cohesive group. And I think that leaves like the best, kind of makes you seem the most formidable. And then there's a debrief. And then for both of these things, what I think is really important is the follow-up. Email them. When you do calls, say like, oh, I was at the town hall, I did this office visit, and try to really continue to ask. So continue to make the asks after the office visit, after the town hall, ask for progress. And like, sometimes like, if you do an office visit, like as soon as you go in, the legislative assistant will like give you their card. And I've only done this in like as in like through my job, I haven't done this as like a citizen, but then you do have their email address and you could be like, hey, remember when I came to that visit? It was so nice to see you. Now let me just email you directly instead of having to go through the main line. I think sometimes that is, use it more sparingly, but you do, I think, make a contact with people that are higher up. All right, so that I'll just kind of do a little pause and say, I think that is like the bulk of the basic congressional advocacy that we are just, especially as people are newer to the space, like really get good at these like basic tasks of doing office visits, doing phone calls, doing going to town hall meetings. And then we the next few slides I'm going to talk about, just quickly kind of go over how to level up and what are some other things that you can be doing. And especially when you have a mosque or a community, as clearly you all are a part of, very civically engaged, how we can do these things in groups to really build power and to build the coalition. Yes, I'm happy to do a recap at the end. And so I think we made the slide when we were all a little bit more enamored with the Biden administration, but I think the Muslim ban is an example of something that countless advocates work for together, all those protests, all the calls, everything. And so when Biden got elected, it was all of that made this happen his very first day. And so, I think going back to the question of, what you would do when like 5 times you've done a visit, I think another answer to that question also is that if we keep talking about this in various ways, like, eventually new people are going to come on board, and maybe it won't be your rep, but maybe it'll be like a state person, maybe it'll be like a city person. And so if we continue the conversation when new politicians come to the forefront, that just gives us we kind of already have a head start in talking about these issues. And so essentially what we like to encourage, or what I like to say, is that all of the things that I just talked about, you make them more powerful by everyone doing it at once and for the same reason. And so, in addition to calling, and I have been sending faxes. There's these websites called like Fax Zero, where you can just send free faxes to your and I think letters are also a really good thing that you can be sending to your members of Congress, because they like physically get something that they have to look at. Same for faxes. And so of course you one-on-one can do that, but letter writing campaigns where you get a bunch of people together to like flood an office with letters is like a really powerful tool. And so a lot of times different organizations will circulate a specific like issue or something. And so the goal will be to send as many letters as possible to ask for change. Second, we also, of course, have digital organizing, social media storms, and uplifting the voices of various folks who are talking about this issue. I'm sure we've seen a lot of creators or stories of people who are being directly impacted, like the Palestinian students who unfortunately were shot. And so these are all ways we can uplift these stories via social media, and we could all like kind of collectively tweet or X or whatever it's called now, and do Instagram and do TikToks. And that's a very significant way, if we do this collectively, to change public perception on an issue, which is a really important part of congressional advocacy as well. Op-eds are also incredibly important. So op-eds are letters. They're letters or articles essentially that the general public or et cetera can send into newspapers, and they could talk about their opinion on an issue. And op-eds are extremely powerful because legislators read op-eds in order to learn how their constituents feel about a certain issue. And so so one example, especially if you have if you're having trouble meeting with your congressperson, or they're doing things that are particularly egregious, is trying to get an op-ed placed in their local paper. This is, at my office, this is like almost like something we do every single time we have legislation moving. We try to get an op-ed. We try to use someone who has like a close connection to the issue, and they write a letter saying, this is how this issue's affected them, and this is why they think people, not just you don't write it to the congressperson just will hopefully read it. Why this issue is so important to you, why you what you think should happen. And like I said, we are happy to talk more about these issues. Like, we could do a whole training on writing op-eds. So this is just a little bit of a preview, but just extremely powerful tool of writing and using the newspapers for our benefit. I also think right now, when media coverage on Gaza has been so terrible, we should be writing to newspapers and telling them that their coverage is bad. And one of my goals is hopefully to write to like the New York Times and Washington Post. It's very hard to get op-eds placed there, but just telling them that their coverage has been very, very bad on this issue. But when you're trying to move like your state legislature or like your federal legislature in your state, local papers is very helpful, and it's easier to get op-eds placed there anyway. So just recapping a little bit, I just again want to emphasize that this is not, you don't have to be a policy expert to do this. Like, these are just like really basic things that we think everyone should be doing, especially the first part of our training, making the calls, going to town halls. This is just everyone. This should be something that's really accessible to everyone. And I hope that through the training, I made it seem like very easy, but I'm happy. Like, step 2 is reach out for help. And I, hope that everyone feels comfortable reaching out to me after this, or others at Poligon, because this is, exactly what we're here for, and we can help you kind of prep your talking points, et cetera. And then, today we spent a lot of time talking about Gaza, but of course there's all these issues that are important in our lives. And there's organizations devoted to so many different rights, or human rights issues, civil rights issues around the country, and they're all doing the work, preparing talking points, preparing legislative handouts. So check out their work. And then finally, show that you have numbers, organize and mobilize your community, and that is really important. And just ending that Poligon is on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And so we're happy to talk there. And then we also are Zakat eligible, tax deductible. As I said at the beginning, we're like a completely voluntary run organization, so always happy for donations. And we also have a survey. So folks, I'll share the slides later so you can take a look at all of these, but I know somebody noted doing our recap at the end. So I would say that the main thing that I would want everyone to leave with is just really the steps of doing the phone call and the town hall, the office visit. This is available on our website, these under resources. So the how to town halls, how to office visits. So you can, if you're doing a an office visit, feel free to just like go on our website, print this out and take it with you. Or if you're going to a town hall, print it out or put it, take a screenshot on your phone. And so you just have it with you. And similarly, the steps of doing a phone call are just recapped there. Just remember, it's so simple. A call, identifying yourself, telling them why you care about something, why it's important to you, and then making a clear ask. So I will stop there and happy to do further questions or whatever is next on the schedule.
Are there any more questions in the chat group? There is one question just now came up. Can you see that, Sister Nadia?
Yes, I think this is more a question for your team, but.
It said, who should we contact at CIOGC for help?
Oh,
You're looking at them right there in the lower left. Shafiq Abu Bakr is the chairperson for the Civic Engagement Committee, and of course, our office supports this committee. In the chat, he's put a link to join, and that'll be a good way for you to be informed of how you can participate, how you can become more civically active in our community. And it's so important this year with the elections coming up. There's people, some saying, I don't even want to vote because of what Biden does and what Trump represents. But to come and learn from the Civic Engagement Committee how you must exercise your right to vote. It's just we need to learn how best to use our voting power and our advocacy to best represent our interest.
any other questions? I believe that's it. Sister Nadia, you are an hour ahead of us, so we don't want to hold you up.
No worries.
Thank you so much.
In Philadelphia, they don't go to bed till 11 o'clock. That's when the news is over, right?
Exactly.
Wherever Muslims are, I believe. I just want to thank you, Sister Nadia. It was an amazing presentation, a lot of information, and our partnership. We're really proud and happy about, Polygon and us are doing similar events from last several years, and we will continue to do. With that, I just want to do a closing remark with all your permission. CIOGC, as most of you know, we are an umbrella organization serving as a unifying force, bringing together over 500,000 Muslim Americans in the greater Chicago region and throughout Illinois, with more than 60 member organizations, including mosques, Islamic schools, and community organizations. The CIOGC represents a large and diverse body. Among the active committees within CIOGC, the Civic Engagement Committee, which is the committee which is organizing this in partnership with Polygon, stands out alongside others such as our Interfaith and Sakat Chicago. The Civic Engagement Committee is a leading force in Islamic organizations, particularly in civic-related activities. Over the years, we have conducted voter registration, get out the vote campaigns very effectively and successfully, coordinating efforts across various masajids. Our commitment extends beyond these trainings. We actively engage with elected officials through meetings, advocacy, and initiatives like the Congressional Town Hall Series. This year, being a critical year for our community and our country, we plan to organize candidate forums in addition to several annual advocacy training throughout the year. Also, some of you may know IMAD, we call in short form Illinois Muslim Action Day. For this year, it is scheduled for May 1st, 2024. Where at this event, we take high schoolers and college-going students to Springfield, along with the leaders from our community, to advocate for bills and issues which matter to us and our country and our state. Connect with us. You all can connect with us using our WhatsApp channel, which I have shared the link in the chat. And also you can go and search for us on Facebook and Instagram. These are great ways to continue your connection with us. We expect your continued involvement and support. And before we go, I want to also request to support Polygon. It's a not-for-profit organization run by individuals like Sister Nadia, and thank you so much once again, Sister Nadia, and your board for your time and effort in this. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make everything easy for our community and make us successful.
Jazakallah khair. Thank you, everyone.
Jazakumullah khairan. Thank you so much, everyone.
Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.